Welcome. Thanks for tuning in to RAD-TV. It's a monthly TV show for rights and democracy, a people-powered organization looking to create grassroots change in our communities. Tonight we're going to have a show about workers' rights and economic justice and talk about the launch of a new campaign that we're involved in called Raise Up Vermont. I am lucky to be joined by Tracy Wade. Tracy is a local leader of rights and democracy who is building this movement and will share her story about lacking benefits as a working mother and tell us about her stake in this movement. We also are fortunate enough to have Reverend Debbie Ingram, who is the Executive Director of Vermont Interfaith Action, a coalition of congregations across the state that seeks to effect systemic change on social issues. She is an ordained minister with the United Church of Christ denomination and sits on the board of directors of the Vermont Conference of UCC Congregations and is also on the Williston Select Board. And we're also fortunate enough to have Felicia Kornblue, who is a writer, professor, and activist. She is the Associate Professor of History and of Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies at the University of Vermont. She is a founding advisor for Rights and Democracy and the president of United Academics, the UVM Faculty Union, which represents 800 full and part-time professors and is a local of the American Federation of Teachers. Kornblue's research centers on the history and politics of social welfare. Her second book, a study of the major welfare reform law in 1996, is entitled Ensuring Poverty, Welfare Reform After 20 Years. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about the problem with workers' rights and economic injustice in Vermont and why we started this campaign called Raise Up Vermont. So we're going to start with you, Tracy. From your experiences, there was recently a big victory fighting for paid sick days. Why was winning paid sick days so important, and why were you involved in that fight?
Well, I started getting involved with this movement, actually, and that's what got me interested in all of it. But paid sick day is a given. It has to be. We have to value our employees enough to give them paid sick days. They're going to be sick. Their family members are going to be sick. If we don't give them paid sick days, then what's going to do our economy? Everyone's just going to, it's going to get worse and worse, and you're going to have unpaid time, and then what happens to their bills, what happens to their rent. I mean, we have a homeless problem anyway. It just all stacks up. So, you know, it has to be changed. We can't keep ignoring it, and it's just time to do it. Why are we going to wait? It's time to do it now before it gets out of control.
Right.
So.
Great. So that law passed and was signed into law on March 9th in Vermont, and will be actually go into effect next year. And we are working on continuing to build off that momentum to win other things. And one campaign that relates to what we feel like we're doing with Raise Up Vermont is something, Debbie, that Vermont Interfaith Action has been doing now for a couple of years, called a Campaign for a Moral Economy. Can you explain to us, you know, what's immoral in your beliefs about the current economy and why these issues matter so much to faith communities?
Yes, we feel that the current economy is immoral because it's unjust. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And that's true not only nationally, but it is actually true in the state of Vermont. We like to think of ourselves as very progressive and kind of exceptional in many ways, but we also are seeing economic trends go in the wrong direction. We have more homeless people than we've ever had before. We have more people on food stamps than ever before. Real wages are declining while economic productivity is actually increasing. So the benefits of the economic growth are going to people at the top income levels. We also have more people who are falling into poverty. Young women who are single mothers of children under 5, almost 50% of them in Vermont live below the federal poverty level. So our clergy got together from many different faith traditions, and we talked from our traditions and our values, and everyone agreed that these trends are just unacceptable. They're morally unacceptable. We cannot allow people to struggle and work and still not be able to meet the needs of their families. So what we believe would be a moral economy instead is one that creates opportunities for everyone who is able to work to have dignified work and to enjoy the dignity of their labor and being able to support their families and contribute to their communities, while also respecting those who are unable to work for whatever reason and providing them the support and assistance they need, and then also taking responsibility for the environment in which we all live and work. So these are the kinds of things that we see as overarching principles, and then within that there are specific policy considerations that we support as a result, and paid sick days was certainly one of them. We're very pleased to have that and that victory, as many organizations are in the state.
Thank you. And Felicia, from your studies and your work with the labor movement, can you talk about why in a country so wealthy as ours, in a state that likes to really think of itself as one of the most progressive states in the country and has that reputation, why are so many people struggling?
Well, I'm just going to build on what Tracy and Reverend Ingram have already said. It's really about political choices. We in the United States, we've experienced something of a decline in our prosperity relative to other countries. Right after World War II, the United States was incredibly powerful and incredibly rich relative to other developed countries. And so our relative position has declined a little bit, but we're still a fantastically wealthy country. And even within the state of Vermont, there's still an awful lot of money here. So there's no economic reason why we have to have these huge disparities of wealth. And there's no economic reason why we have to have the amount of poverty we have. These are all political choices, and I'm trained as a historian, and you can study these trends over time, and it's very clear at a time in the 1960s and 1970s when there was a real commitment to alleviating poverty, and that was a political priority. Poverty declined. It was reduced dramatically for elderly people, older people in the United States, because we have Medicare for health care, and we have Social Security, and we have local programs like in Chittenden County, we have relatively good senior housing for people who are above a certain age. Guess what? Elder poverty has declined dramatically. You could just, you just look at the numbers. Before Medicare and before Social Security cost of living increases came in the 1970s, rates of poverty were much higher, and now they're lower. It's totally within our control. As a society, as a state, to reduce poverty or even to eliminate poverty. And I'll say, as a trade unionist and as a labor leader, we also see that there's been a dramatic decline in the number and the percentage of people who are represented by labor unions. In other words, who are able collectively to face their employers as a group with some power and with some legal protection. And that also makes an enormous difference. I think the reason that we have lower rates of unionization are also political reasons. And I think because we have lower rates of unionization, that's one of the factors that produces our real weakness as working people. I mean, I represent college professors, and some of the college professors I represent, part-time professors at the University of Vermont with PhDs and years of experience, some of those people are receiving public benefits. It is a crime. And these are people who are hardworking and dedicated. They don't want to have to change jobs. They don't want to have to change careers. They want to teach. They want to do their work. And it's simply not economically feasible. So it's all about politics. And I think we need politics on the kind of state policy end to work on issues of public benefits, but we also need a political will to enable people to organize and to represent themselves when they face their employers. There's no substitute for it. It's a fundamental form of democracy, which has just been getting weaker and weaker in our country.
Right. So you touch on kind of the need for organizing to be able to change this equation, and looking at history, how we've addressed this, how we've gotten more equitable societies, less inequality, has been when people have been organizing. And so, partly as we look at what the solution would be, as we said, we're launched this new campaign, Raise Up Vermont, and we think that, in addition to organizing on a workplace level and in our community level, that we need to get serious on organizing on a political level and being able to bring, demands to raise the bottom standards for workers' rights up in the state, like we've done, creating a minimal standard for paid sick days. And back on March 9th, the same day that they signed paid sick days into law, we launched a new campaign called Raise Up Vermont in the Statehouse. And we're going to run a quick clip of that from the Statehouse back on March 9th in the Cedar Creek room.
Go down, businesses suffer because Vermonters don't have the money to spend at local businesses. When incomes go down, poverty, homelessness, and hunger go up, and then the need for state services goes up. And then policymakers in this building say, gee, we're sorry, we don't have any money. We have a deficit. You have to ask the question, why? We all know there's not less money in Vermont than there was 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. What we know is that the increases in income and wealth are going to the wealthy who already have more than they need. That's the issue. That's why we're here asking for economic justice and asking the real question, which is whether policymakers will have the political will to recognize that problem and to stand firm and support the families that are here today. Thank you.
That was Senator Anthony Polina from Washington County speaking at the press conference. You could see next to him was Debbie, Reverend Ingram, and we had a number of other members and other elected officials there. And what we were saying is that essentially the priorities are out of step in our State House. That we need to do much better for working families, and so we launched this to build off that victory, to work on other things like raising the minimum wage to an actual livable wage. There was a push a couple of years ago in 2014 to raise the minimum wage, and every bill that had been introduced was starting place was in 2016. This year was supposed to raise it up to $12 an hour, and that would be getting us somewhere in terms of what it actually costs to live and afford to rent, own a place in Vermont, and so on. But unfortunately, they ended up only doing up to $10.50 in 2018. So that's a big piece of it, is like, how do we raise the minimum wage? Another big issue was paid family and medical leave. So paid sick days is great, but for so many parents and people who are have medical situations or have loved ones who do, that have to be out, that we could actually join the rest of the industrialized world and have paid family and medical leave for all Vermonters. There's a bill that was passed to create a study how Vermont could do that, and so that's one of the things that we're hoping that we can move forward in the next year or so. Another issue that is now being talked about is a law around independent contractors. The unfortunate thing is they're looking at right now in a House a law that could make it easier for businesses to misclassify people as independent contractors as a way to avoid having their responsibilities around workers' compensation and around paid sick days. And what we think needs to happen is for strengthening those laws, so that they're actually, the laws that we have are enforced, and that kind of, they call it like Uberization of the economy, doesn't happen. But in terms of the question around paid family and medical leave, Tracy, you've had some experiences around the need for that. Can you talk about, from your experience, what that would mean if we had that in Vermont?
Wow. Yeah, I've had a lot of experience with that. Starting actually many years ago, from 2006 on, I had an immediate family member that was medically, declined and was going to be for lifetime. So as a single mother and a limited family, had to try and figure out, how am I going to do this? And that is when employers first started combining all of your time. So you had sick time, vacation time, you didn't get paid for FMLA time, you had to use your other time, which is actually what it has progressed to the same today. So for that many years, it has been where we've had to use all of our time, and after that's gone, you're then unpaid. Well, as single parents are out there, even with two family incomes, cost of living has gotten so high that you get a day or two of without pay. And that is just detrimental to your budget, to your lifestyle, to anything. You can't pay rent, or you can't, get groceries for the week. You have to go to the food shelf. Or, I mean, it's just amazing when I look back when my career started in the 80s, yay. We were valued. We were valued employees. We were respected, and our companies gave us vacation time, sick time, and FMLA time, including 5 personal days to use a year. Now, you wouldn't believe, we wanted to work. We loved working. We still love working, but you were more apt to do a better job because you were respected, you were valued, you were able to live a humane lifestyle. Right? It didn't have to be a rich lifestyle, just a humane lifestyle you could do for your family. And over time, I don't know where we decided corporations could dictate to us to take our value away of who we are as people and employees when we're running their corporations. And yet our wages aren't going up, they're going down, if anything. We're having to combine and use all of our time, if any. I feel sorry for the ones that don't even get that. But, and I've been there. I've had the electricity turned off, and we've lived by candles, and I've had, the no food, here's your potato for the night, because we've got to pay rent. And I've had the foreclosures come on the house and the evictions, and you have all that when you have got so much time that you have to take for the health of that person. And they won't fire you over it, but they sure don't help you, And now my current situation is I have 2 family members, actually 3 that are medically, but 2 that are disabled, that I have had to move here from another state to live with me to take care of them. And yet we're not getting any more help, no more raise, no more, like you said about the increase in the homeless, and it's just amazing to see how much money is out there and how some people are living. We've got to make a change. It has to be changed.
Can I say something about the family and medical leave? Mm-hmm. So I worked in Washington when the law was passed, and it was a huge advance that people now can take 12 weeks, but it's such a bait and switch. Mm-hmm. The only thing I think that the Family and Medical Leave Act at the national level really provides is a kind of job security,
right?
Assuming that your employer doesn't break the law. Mm-hmm. So it gives you that security. You can come back to your job, but it's such a class divide and an income divide. Mm-hmm. Who can afford to take even that little bit of time to bond with their kid or to take care of an ill or an elderly family member? There's got to be a better way.
Or God forbid yourself.
Right.
It's just, it's just not enough. They have to separate again these time increments in order to, families need to get the families back, and we need to do for them what we should have been doing all along.
Well, just, Debbie, the excuse that we often hear about why we couldn't do paid sick days until we did, why we couldn't raise the minimum wage to a livable wage, why we can't have paid family and medical leave, is that it somehow would put lots of businesses out of business. It would be terrible for the economy. Is that true?
No, it's not. It's not true. I really think it's a red herring of an argument. First of all, when employees are treated well, as Tracy was saying, it's much easier to recruit employees. It's much easier to retain employees. Their productivity goes up. If it's a sales or service-oriented kind of business, the employees will promote the business so that it does better. So there are many advantages to treating your employees well. And I think if a business, I've run businesses before in previous jobs that I've had throughout my life, and if a business is run well, and the idea is not to just amass incredible profits, but to take what's reasonable and then to share that with your employees. It's perfectly doable. And studies were done actually when they were talking about raising the minimum wage before at the Statehouse, and I heard that $12.50 was analyzed, what came out in the analysis as something that would have worked fine for and not have damaged any of our businesses, and yet the legislature didn't have enough courage to have that extra $2 in. Mm-hmm. So. People are suffering as a result of it, and it's really not a viable argument.
And Felicia, just kind of building off that, there's some sort of relationship, right, between what's happening in the workplace, and then it's also like what's happening in our communities, and certain what's happening in terms of like the poverty that we're facing. Can you talk about that relationship between, what are the standards in the workplace, and then how that impacts beyond the workplace?
Yeah, well, the first thing is kind of an intellectual and a political thing, and I think the work that Rights and Democracy is doing, and the work that many of us are trying to do, speaks to that we can't have a conversation about poverty over here and then a conversation about work and workers and the workplace over here. And I think we've done that for too long, and I think they do that too much. In Montpelier and in Washington, when we talk about poverty, well, then we're in a conversation about school meals for kids, when their parents are low income, or we're in a conversation about housing assistance or something like that. And we're talking about the workplace, we're talking about labor law, or we're talking about maybe minimum wages and other workplace protections. And I think particularly at this moment in time, and particularly in a state like Vermont, we have to see those two things as really the same conversation and the same problem. There's so many people in this state, and this is what keeps me up at night. There's so many people in this state who work so hard and still can't make it. Everybody's working. Everybody's proud of working. I mean, Vermont is just, is full of the proudest, hardest working Yankees you'll ever want to meet. And we have a low unemployment rate, and we still have these outrageous rates of poverty. And so we have to be working on those two things together. We have to make work genuinely decent, and we have to say sometimes, maybe it's appropriate for you to be out of the labor force for a little while. I mean, I know that's almost like an un-American thing to say, but like when you have ill family members, when you're ill yourself, when you're taking care of a kid who has severe disabilities, when you've adopted a child or had a child, whether you're a mother or a father, there might be appropriate times when it's actually okay to be outside the labor market, and we should be supporting people, because there's more to life than just what you do at a job site. And if we're going to be a society that's really nurturing and a state that's really healthy overall, I think we're going to be supporting people in the workplace and outside the workplace. And I think the only way we're going to get there is through this kind of organizing, through Rights and Democracy type organizing, through labor organizing in our workplaces, and through pressuring the folks in Montpelier who get to make a lot of these decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Could I just piggyback a little bit off of what Felicia was saying? I think that one of the things that's so important is kind of changing our attitudes of traditional America, where we believe in rugged individualism and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. And one of the things that matters a lot to faith communities is the concept of community, of really creating a sense where we're all in this together. We're here to support one another, to have compassion for one another, to try to create a society that is just. And what you're saying about there are times when it's appropriate for people to be out of the workforce because they're doing extremely important work. They're just not working outside the home, perhaps taking care of sick loved ones. But we need to support that as a society, and those are the kinds of values that communities of faith are really anxious to see more in society at large.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this has been just such a powerful kind of exchange about about what we should have for public policy, that it should be driven by the values of our communities and our families, and that it can happen. And it also reminds me of the importance of this, community media, because this is not the kind of discussion that you get in the mainstream media. You don't hear about this if you turn on to, many programs. But this is actually what matters to people, and it's fundamentally, about how do we have the kind of healthy communities that we all would want. Right. So we are coming towards the end of the show, and we wanted to explain a few different things that are happening. So one, I mentioned this thing about the misclassification of independent contractors and the law that's currently being considered. So one thing is, if you are interested at all in being able to talk about that issue of independent contracting, have a story, have ever been in some ways coerced to take a job and saying that, even though you're really going to be an employee, we're going to have you signed a 1099, and that's the opportunity in front of you. We'd love to hear from you. We've heard too many stories from folks that have been in that situation, but right now they're dealing with this law, and it's important that people make their voices heard. Right now, all the business associations and people that are really just trying to think about their bottom lines are making their voices heard in the Statehouse, and so we'd love to hear from you. So you can call us at 802-272-0882, or send me an email at james@radvt.org, and we'd love to talk to you about that. Another thing that we wanted to mention quick is, Tracy, you're part of the local Burlington area organizing team.
Yes.
Can you tell people about what it'd be like to get involved in that?
Well, it's amazing. First of all, it's needed. It's necessary to make these changes happen. It's time to do it, and if not you, then who? And if not now, then when? The usual. But on my point, I finally feel like I'm actually doing something. I'm not just talking the talk, because we can all complain. We can all, continue to complain. But if we are not doing something about it, come on, we can do this.
Great.
We just need you to come help.
All right, so come out, come join us. We have one announcement we want to also make about an upcoming panel on April 9th. We're going to have a candidates panel called Raise Up Vermont. I think we have an image that we can bring up here about that. It's coming up in Middlebury and in Bennington. There's going to be a candidates forums where we're going to be asking the candidates for governor whether or not that they care about these issues, what are their stances on these issues. And right now we've had 4 confirmed that are coming. We have Peter Galbraith, Matt Dunn, and Sue Minter and Bruce Lissman. We haven't heard from Phil Scott whether or not he's coming, so we're hoping that he'll come and at least start talking about these issues as he runs for governor. Would he support raising the minimum wage? And so we're asking, where's Phil? But we're hoping that you can join us. Send the word to your folks down in the Addison County, Bennington County areas. We hope you join us. And any final thoughts as we wrap up the show tonight?
Well, I would say when I was talking about community that I really admire the way that the organizing happened around paid sick days, and in terms of building community, there was a lot of reaching out to business owners also. And when we attended the press conference when the governor actually signed the bill, there was a business owner there who was saying how great it was that he owned a small business in Vermont, but that the bill leveled the playing field for him competing with these big corporations that come in from out of the state. So, I just want to say that I think it's really important for us to build community and to include everybody at the table, including business owners and workers. So I hope we can keep doing that.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining us here tonight. Thank you to our guests for the show. And we're very excited. So we do this every last Friday of the month, RAD-TV. We'll be back next month. If you're interested in getting involved, you can go to our website, www.radvt.org, or give us a call or send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. A lot of good work going on right now. We have a lot of work to do. So thanks again for joining us, and hope to see you soon.